You came back! Oh, bless your hearts, lovelies. Bless your loyal souls. I knew you wouldn't leave me abandoned, wet and cold down here in the sunken knot of rust and attack Italians here on the second installment of Tomb Raider Tuesday here in the living quarters. Stage numero 90. I know it's nueve, shut up. I can count to 10 in more languages than you know exist. Avast ye, hat wearer! Would you like to hear me multiply 12 by 9 in the cruel tongue of Catholic Magast, the cosmic necro donkey that rules the moons of Ethek? Blah! Blah! There you go. Fuck, I forgot to carry the 1. Look heck! Look heck! No! Perfect. Who needs a calculator? Not you, if you don't want to be immediately put to death on his world for such an act. Now, despite the name of the level, there are actually a sum total of 0 living quarters to explore throughout this relatively short and stress-free journey. In fact, you'll find that the vast majority of this level is completely unfit for human habitation, unless you're some sort of rat-man hybrid, or perhaps belegged fish, an amphibious scaled abomination that emerges from the shallow flooding in the trenches underneath the engine room to feed upon unwary maintenance staff and horny teenagers. Here you can see that our old friends, the sentient attack barrels, are rolling out the welcome wagon for us. This part of the ship's on fire for some goddamn reason. If leaping through those exposed 5.5-foot jets of flame looked like an incredibly dangerous thing to do there, then congratulations! Your parents nailed at least some small portion of your upbringing. You're actually meant to head to the top of the attack barrel ramp and shimmy along a ledge to get past them, but who wants to watch 30 seconds of bloody shimmying on a Tomb Raider video? Wouldn't you skip it? Wouldn't you unsubscribe and never come back? Never give me the opportunity to charm me into paying me Patreon money and buying my merchandise? No, I won't have that, lovelies. This crusade doesn't pay for itself. There's always steel to forge, tents to darn, gold coins to callously flip into a crowd of plague-ridden beggars to watch them fight to the death while we eat our dinner. Money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you other people's misery, and that's a good start. This jump is a pain in the ass. Nailed it. You have to turn ever so slightly in mid-air. That ledge with a stone dragon is just askew so that Lara can't hit a straight running jump. And we locked out a second time there as well because you've got a no-frills 50% chance of that shotgun goon wandering out onto the ledge while you're trying to climb up and unloading 3 shells into the back of your ponytail. And human hair, not the best armor against gunfire, despite what the shampoo adverts tell you. Now this block or crate or whatever you want to call it, in some versions of Tomb Raider 2, it's not here. You don't have to deal with it at all. It's a part of a small but aggravating puzzle. You'll see as we round the corner here and shove this second block out of the way that there's a hole to the left of us. We'll need to climb back up this way once we've flooded the piston room that we hopped across to get the stone dragons. So if you forget to pull the first crate back after you leave here, which much like the bullshit with double pressing the button to close the glass doors we saw back on the wreck of the Maria Doria, is something you never find yourself doing in this franchise, you'll have to loop all the way back around and fix it before you can move on, because you'll be shot in the passageway. A scenario that is far less of a head scratcher if you don't have that first block to deal with, so I'm pretty sure they left it out of the Japanese release of the game completely. In fact, the Japanese versions of the majority of these older core design Tomb Raider titles were made a fair bit easier for their audiences. The enemies are a lot weaker and less numerous, and I can't tell you which ones for certain because I've never played it myself, but I know that some of the traps were removed entirely. 'Tis strange, isn't it? Japanese gamers have long carried the stereotype of being the kind of video game master race, able to ace Ninja Gaiden with one hand and wreck 5 hours of maths homework with the other. But right the way back to the NES days, you see that there were a hell of a lot of tweaks made, especially on side-scrolling and run-and-gun titles to give them an easier ride. Ninja Gaiden actually is a great example. You've heard me talk about the third game, Ancient Ship of Doom, quite a lot, if you tune into the Retro Rumbles especially, and how notoriously difficult that is. Definitely one of those top 5 toughest of all time contenders. But the Japanese release of it, nowhere near. Unlimited continues, password feature, 3/4 of the enemies, none of which hit anywhere near as hard. The game didn't dump you right back at the start of the act whenever you died, which you did interminably, forever. I think they even skipped out on some parts of the environment doing you damage too, like the quicksand, and you might be tempted to look at that as a neutering of the original challenge, but forget ye not that most of these games came out first in Japan anyway, so it was really a case of the difficulty being toned down for the Japanese release as much as it was being cranked up in spades for the rest of the world. Battletoads, now you know the reputation that son of a bitch carries with it, and if you've been with the channel a while, you might have seen me pull off a fairly clean run of it too. Often named as the hardest game ever made, but only on the NES. The Genesis port of it is a lot less harsh, and that's because it's adapted from the Japanese release. But then there were a number of exceptions that flew in the face of that. Mega Man 2 was actually the reverse, where the American version had an entire separate option for reduced difficulty. Super Mario Bros. Was another famous example where the direct sequel was considered far too tough for Western audiences and was just flat out never released until the Super Mario All-Stars compilation on the Super NES. Our Super Mario Bros. 2 was that bizarre reskin of Doki Doki Panic, so in conclusion, what the fuck? It's a goddamn headache when I'm trying to pick the best version of a game to play for a Retro Rumble or a Sanctuary Sunday. Boy howdy, let me tell you. Those difficulty tweaks aren't always so clear cut. Castlevania 3 is a good example of the very end of the game being harder in the NES port, but the start to middle of it being harder on the Famicom original. Throwing all the variables like censorship and the much better soundtrack on the Famicom, and goodness me, that's a night's sleep lost rolling that decision over in my head, lovelies. And then you got that nonsense where you get 2 games of the same name released simultaneously for multiple consoles. Like, I want to play The Adventures of Batman and Robin at some point for Sanctuary Sunday. Let's take The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Completely different bloody game on the Genesis than it is on the Super NES. Couldn't be less alike. Which one do I play? Should I do them together? Should I pick the tougher one? Aladdin! Aladdin, for Christ's sake. How many versions of Aladdin do you really need? Disney did that with practically every goddamn title they released in the 16-bit era. And they released a lot. I remember, actually, one of the very first PC games I got as a kid was Toy Story. And you know, you think, shit, everything's better on PC, isn't it? I played Doom on PC and the Genesis by that point, and the difference was obviously night and day, so I thought, well, I've got the definitive edition here now, haven't I? Woody and the gang gonna ride in on Windows 95 looking sharp as fuck. And to be fair, right, they did. The PC version runs great, looks great. But then, I stumble upon a guide for it in a magazine and find out that on the Genesis and the Super NES versions, there's an FPS level that's not in the PC version. Hold up a fucking second, goddammit. You developed an FPS stage for Toy Story, a genre that you would have to say was all PC at that point in history, custom made for desktops, could not bloody move for the sheer amount of first-person shooters on the market at that point. And that was the one version of the game you didn't put it in. Idiota! But of course I didn't stop there, because baffling design choices never just come in ones, do they? They're a multi-pack deal, not for individual resale. Now when you think of 16-bit racing games, which console springs to mind? Got to be the Super NES, right? Mario Kart, F-Zero, Top Gear, Stunt Race FX, Uniracers, bloody Cyber Spin, Biker Mice from Mars, Battle Cars, Battle Grand Prix. That's not even all of them, not by a long way. I mean, yeah, the Genesis had a pretty sturdy racing library itself, but Very few of them were exclusives, save for Road Rash, which, like most exclusive titles on the Genesis, was more about outlandish violence than anything else. Super NES was the racing game and RPG console. Genesis was the brutal side-scroller console, for the most part. So, guess which system Toy Story decided to cut the exclusive racing stage out of? Wasn't the Genesis or the PC. You Got a Friend in Me. The Toy Story song. You think Toy Story, you think Randy Newman gurning that one out of the piano, didn't you? Super NES didn't get that tune, and the standing theory behind that is that it was because the sound quality on that release of the game was much lower than either the Genesis or the PC, which would maybe make sense if it hadn't also shown up on the Game Boy. Like, really? You could arrange the theme tune for the fucking 4-channel Game Boy sound system, but not an 8-channel one on the Super NES. And please, don't take my word for it. Go and track down You've Got a Friend in Me on the Game Boy. Pour yourself a quality wine, close your eyes, and try to relax to that in the bath. Even beyond the grating tonality of the damn thing, it is the sound of the first night of the Randy Newman comeback tour, except Randy hasn't practiced and has forgotten how to play all of his music, and may not even really be Randy Newman at all. You know what? I think I might have talked about Toy Story more than Tomb Raider in this video now, so let's back away from Andy's room right now. Let's leave it alone. Sorry. Oh, this stage bores the shit out of me. My mind, she wanders. Alright, son of a bitch, what else can we say about the living quarters? Well, we've reached maybe the one part of it you could actually live in, as we charge guns blazing into this theatre right here. Now you notice as well that everything's the right way up in this stage as opposed to the topsy-turvy wonderland that was Wreck of the Maria Doria. I think this might be the one part of the Shipwreck as a whole that does make sense orientation-wise. It's commonly missed that right at the beginning of the stage you're swimming between the two split halves of the Maria Doria, so one lands upside down, the other locks out and sits the right way up. Nothing unprecedented about that, I guess. Whoa! Did you... Did you see that? That motherfucker can float! Goddamn super goon! Oh, I've never actually seen that happen before. But saying that, he has always been a weird bastard, that fella. His spawning pattern is all over the place. Sometimes he's already here when you first enter, sometimes he runs out from behind the stage as you're exiting the balcony up there, but... I've never seen him just descend like the fucking angel of death from the ceiling like that before. Well, believe it or not, shit will get much, much stranger once we head into the next level, the deck. Especially when you see what sort of state the rest of the ship is in, but also worth remembering that when we initially swam into the Maria Doria back in 40 fathoms, the whole damn ship was lying on its side. We actually snuck in here through the anchor hole. And then at some point between swimming inside and surfacing in that initial area with the crates, the wreck managed to magically turn itself the right way up and then flip itself upside down again after we passed through the door to reach Wreck of the Maria Doria. So I mean, unless Johnny Bartley had the entire entertainment complex of the ship constructed arse about tit to begin with, as some kind of deranged nautical experiment, bizarre machinations would seem to be afoot 80 feet below the surface here. Mosey on back here in a bit for a tear around the final chunk of this accursed sea tomb before we head back to dry land in the deck.